Hey, everybody. We are at the IMMH Integrative Medicine for Mental Health Conference in San Diego, and super blessed that you agreed to talk with us. I really appreciate it. This is Patrick McKeown, and you are from...
I'm from Buteyko Clinic International, so we're based in Ireland, but we're represented in about 50 countries.
That's amazing. And you've written several books. I have had people in our community ask about the importance of breath work. And unfortunately, I've told them that I've failed every breath work thing. I think I'm just too sympathetic. But I would love to learn more how we can support our children, how you got into this. So I know you have several books, very interesting, anxiety free, which is, especially for mamas, we deal with a lot of anxiety. So yeah, let's get started. How did you get interested in breathing?
Sure. I had difficulties in school, pretty much. Not so much when I was a young kid. I was quite bright. I was very much at the top of the class. When I went to high school, I went from the top of the class down to the bottom of the class. And I would be looking at the teacher, but while my eyes were directed to what the teacher was saying, my attention wasn't. It was stuck in my head. And for me to get through my school, I had to work really, really hard. And then I did get into university. I got through university, got my master's. And then I read a newspaper article about breathing in and out through the nose and about breathing less air. In other words, not to be breathing fast, hard, shallow chest breathing. I was doing all of that. And then I started changing to nasal breathing and slowing down my breathing and breathing less air, breathing light. In other words, undoing the habits that I developed as a kid, as a teenager. And it totally changed my life to the point that I left. Well, I didn't leave the university master's. I just didn't use it. I retrained then in respiration. And I went to a Ukrainian doctor. He was based in Russia at the time. So I trained with him, and then I came back and I started working with asthma and sleep disorders, and for children and for adults. That's 23 years ago now, though.
That's amazing. So doing well in early school, then had trouble paying attention, and it was just an article that you read that profoundly changed your life.
Well, it was an article that resonated with me because it was an article that said don't mouth breathe, that there's nothing inside the mouth that does anything for breathing. You know, if we think as human beings, what is inside our mouth? Our teeth, our tongue, our hard palate, soft palate, the back of the throat, gums, saliva. You know, nothing is there for respiration. So the mouth has no function for breathing other than an emergency. And our nose does everything when it comes to breathing, genuinely. And there's so many functions of the nose. I have 31 functions of the nose, but I know there's more. And we also know that people are calmer when they breathe in and out through the nose. They're less likely to ruminate. They've got much better sleep quality. They've got better dental health. They've got better recruitment of the diaphragm. They're just overall healthier individuals in a better state of mind.
So the ruminating, that caught me, because here we are at the mental health conference.
Yes.
And we know kids struggle so much, whether they're exposed to social media and they see something upsetting, school is hard, peers are hard. So you're saying, can you tell me just a little more about that? How nasal breathing changes the way we can do that?
Yes, yeah. So researchers identified different parts of the brain called the default mode network. And when we go into mind wandering or rumination, these different parts of the brain light up. And these parts, there's increased activity with people with mental health or a person who ruminates a lot, overthinking. They have overactivity in the default mode network and also increased connectivity. And papers have shown that when you switch from mouth to nose breathing, it helps to reduce connectivity. And it also, with mouth breathing, what happens is that the parts of the brain associated with speech light up. And of course, when we're communicating, we're thinking. So it would be inevitable that a person who's persistently breathing through the mouth, child or adult. Now, we have to bear in mind that between 30 to 60% of children persistently mouth breathe. And is it during rest or during physical exercise or during sleep? Those children, not only do they have increased connectivity of the default mode network, but they also are more likely to have poor sleep. So now you're tying in increased activity of the brain, poor sleep quality, but also because the mouth breathing and the faster and shallow breathing increase sympathetic drive. All of these factors are going to contribute to rumination of the mind. So now the child is stuck in their head. And the problem with that then is that when the child then comes across a challenge, they can react quite strongly to the challenge. Whereas if we can change breathing patterns and start switching just to the basics, to how our ancestors would have breathed, in and out through the nose, tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, lips together, with the lower jaw, gently forward to help open up the airway for sleep, it just leads to a much calmer state of mind. And I think there's long-term implications too, because if you look at the work of Karen Bonnock, so I'd spell her surname Bonnuck, so she's a prolific researcher from New York, and she did research in Europe, in the United Kingdom, and she looked at children aged 6 months to 57 months, 11,049 children.
Okay.
So it's a huge population over a considerable length of time. And she looked at these children if they had behavioral sleep problems or sleep disorder breathing. The children with either behavioral sleep problems or sleep disorder breathing at age 5, if those children were not treated, they had a 40% increased risk of special education needs by age 8. Now, in that article, 40% increased risk of special education needs.
Oh, and that's where I guess the mouth breather
She mentions mouth breathing, she mentions snoring, she mentions apnea. So they were the hallmark symptoms. And she puts it down to, you'll get her article, it's published in Pediatrics, which is a very high impact journal. And it's a free article, so you'll be able to read the entire thing. She talks about there's 3 million people here in the United States, aged between 6 and 21 years of age, and that they have conditions associated with poor sleep quality. And the problem is that whatever happens during the formative years, it's not just isolated to the formative years. These issues then carry on throughout the child's life. So you're talking then about a child that may not be able to cope as well with life's ups and downs, not able to do as well academically, not performing to the best of their ability, not having the attention to hold attention, because slow wave sleep, if we think about sleep, it comes in a number of stages. You've got very light sleep, and then stage 2, which is light sleep 2. And then you have stage 3, which is deep sleep, and then you go into REM. But stage 3 is very, very important, that we get adequate adequate stage 3 sleep. And it's even probably more important for a child because this is when their brain is developing. So their brain develops in stage 3. But if a child is stopping breathing, and all they have to do is stop breathing for 2 breaths or more, or if they are mouth breathing or snoring, that can disrupt their sleep, and take them out of stage 3 back into stage 2. So they spend more time then in light sleep, and as a result then they don't get adequate brain development. So I think for any parent, given the instance of mouth breathing in children, it's so important for parents just to observe their child. When your child is distracted, is the mouth open? Is your child sleeping with their mouth open? Can you hear your child snoring? We should never hear a child breathe during sleep. The breathing of a child should be in and out through the nose, driven by the diaphragm. It should be silent. It should be effortless. There should be no resistance to that child's breathing, because if there is resistance to the child's breathing during sleep, it will impact their sleep quality.
And then, so brain development plus growth, plus the immune system, plus all the things that our bodies are supposed to do in stage 3 are not being done for that child.
Correct. And
they wake up tired.
The child itself may not wake up again, the symptoms can be a little bit different. Yeah, you will have children that are kind of a little bit spaced out, but more than likely with children, less fatigue, but more attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, because they're in this increased sympathetic drive. So basically their poor sleep has put them into a stress response, and the stress response carries throughout the day. So the children then can have a tendency to be hyperactive. Now, I'm not saying that all ADHD is a result of poor sleep.
Sure, no, it's a contributor.
It is, but I am saying this, is that the children that I've seen, and the children that when I talk to professionals that are working with neurodivergence or ADHD, sleep is often implicated to be a problem. And we then have to ask this question: are we really going to get to the root of helping these children if those children continue to have inadequate sleep quality? And sleep quality there's a huge difference between a child who is mouth breathing during sleep versus a child who is nose breathing. There is no comparison. And the other thing about mouth breathing is that when the child has the mouth open, now I can go even a step further. You could have a new infant. And say, for example, that child is tongue-tied. So
we see that a lot.
The string that's connected from their tongue to the floor of their mouth, if it's too tight, that child then isn't able to breastfeed, because what happens is they just simply can't raise their tongue from the floor of the mouth to be able to extrapolate the milk from the breast. And what happens then is that the child, in order to get the milk from the mother, ends up chomping on the mother, but the child isn't able to get adequate milk. The mother gets sore and the child doesn't thrive. So then a bottle is introduced. But a bottle is just free-flowing. Milk is just going down the child's throat. So breastfeeding isn't just about the nutrition. It's also important for the manipulation of the muscles necessary for craniofacial growth. Yes. So when the child is working from the breast, it's helping to develop all of these muscles here. And also, with that, then the child is able to have their tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. And as the child's tongue, with nasal breathing, and the tongue is resting in the roof of the mouth, the maxilla, which is the top jaw, will form around the shape of the tongue. And the tongue is wide and U-shaped. So now there's plenty of room for the tongue in the child's mouth. But it will also follow that because the maxilla is developed into this wide U-shaped, that there's plenty of room for teeth. And in the baby dentition, we should see gaps between teeth, because the baby teeth are going to be smaller than the adult teeth when the adult teeth erupt. So if you have a child and you don't see any gaps in the baby dentition, but then when those teeth fall out and the adult teeth start to erupt, there's going to be overcrowding. And it's not that, like, overcrowding is so common. I don't know a statistic, but it could be 70%, 75%.
Yeah, I was going to say at least 60% of kids need braces.
And the thing about this is this isn't just aesthetics, because we have to be asking the question, like, if the child's jaw hasn't developed the way it should have developed, there's going to be overcrowding of teeth. It's not that the teeth are too big. It's not necessarily a genetic. We didn't have this problem genetically. This is very much an environmental driven issue. You know, if you look at skulls of prehistoric individuals, or even going back, it's not that long ago, 400 or 500 years ago, the incidence of malocclusions or overcrowding of teeth was much less than it is today. The problem with overcrowding of teeth is the jaws are too small, jaws are often set back, the tongue is not able to rest in the roof of the mouth, so the tongue now is going back into the airway. The airway is narrowed, so now that child has issues in craniofacial poor development of the face and the airway, which again carries all the way through that child's life. Now, if we look at then obstructive sleep apnea and upper airway resistance syndrome and snoring and all of that, I don't think we reach our full potential. How can we? How can we if we don't have the capacity to make decisions, to concentrate, to hold attention, and to regulate in terms of stress?
Right, that's not a thriving child by any means.
Or a thriving adult.
And the answer is CPAP, right? Let's put everybody on a CPAP. I mean, it's because we didn't do what we needed to do when they were babies.
Yeah, and the CPAP, it works. But let's look at some statistics on this one. 85% of people with sleep apnea are undiagnosed. So only 15% get diagnosed.
Oh, okay.
These are just the official stats. You can check these, just facts. So 15% of people get diagnosed. Out of the 15% of people that get diagnosed, only 40% of people will accept treatment, using the CPAP as the gold standard. Of that 40%, 50% will abandon it within 3 to 6 months. So if you have 100 people in a town with sleep apnea, only 3 of them are getting treatment. 97 of them have no treatment. And the incidence that's estimated of obstructive sleep apnea on this planet is 936 million. And that's according to a review in The Lancet by Malhotra, who is one of the senior figures in sleep medicine. But I can talk about children, because let's look at that one as well. And this again isn't, listen, if a child has sleep disorder breathing, it's so important to address it. There's no other option. It has to be addressed, because the implications of sleep disorder breathing and apneas in children, it's too much for that child. And the child, it can affect the development. They can be smaller, they don't grow the way they should be growing as a kid. They can have 10 times the risk of learning difficulties. Their mood, behavior, everything can be affected with it. So let's look at the gold treatment of helping people or children with sleep disorder breathing. It's removing the adenoids and tonsils. This is a practice that's been carried out since in around the 1970s and before that. There's a paper that was published in the American Journal of Critical Care Medicine, and the lead author there is Patrick. So you'll find, again, it's online.
Sure.
They looked at 578 children. These children had their adenoids and tonsils removed. Only 27% of these kids had their sleep disorder breathing cured. 73% of children continued to have sleep disorder breathing post-surgery. So we need to look at that it's never just the enlarged adenoids or the tonsils that are the sole cause of obstructive sleep apnea in children. If it was, it would mean that removal of the adenoids, the enlarged adenoids and enlarged tonsils, would solve the issue.
Fix it, right.
It didn't. Inflammation is also a factor. Mouth breathing is a factor. Obesity is a factor. The enlarged adenoids and tonsils are a factor. And asthma is a factor. So if you have children who are obese, or if they have asthma, or if they have inflammation, or if, for example, in terms of also the craniofacial development, you know, like even if you remove the adenoids and tonsils, but if that child has been a persistent mouth breather with their maxilla, which is set back, which is going to narrow the airway, because if the maxilla goes back, the mandible goes back. The mandible, the lower jaw, follows the top jaw. If the tongue is resting in the roof of the mouth, as the tongue rests in the roof of the mouth, the tongue is exerting a pressure, driving the growth of the face forward. So the maxilla then comes forward. As the maxilla comes forward, the mandible is forward and the airway is more open, and then the child, teenager, young adult has a significantly reduced risk of sleep apnea.
So all that to say maybe is when they're newborns, when they're babies, we need to watch for this and make sure their tongue is not tied, the frenula is not too tight. So that means it's worth, do you have any thoughts on the laser, just getting it lasered when they're really young?
I think if it's absolutely necessary, you know, you never want to run the risk of putting a child under a procedure that if it's not warranted. I think people have to be careful because sometimes, you know, it almost becomes so common to the point that then what will happen is that it stops altogether because people can overdo it. But I think it needs to be really checked out by an individual who can identify whether the child, and it's not just about the front part either, it's not just about the anterior, you could have a posterior tongue tie. You know, so, and also it needs to be combined with myofunctional therapy. Mm-hmm. Because the tongue tie can reattach if, for example, the child doesn't get specific exercises. I think there's other disciplines necessary to look into whether that child has a very high palate, and even simple techniques that the practitioner can use, putting the thumbs into the child's mouth just to help develop the maxilla. I think the children's food can be a factor. If they're eating very, very soft food, they're not chewing, they're not developing the muscles of mastication. You know, does the child have a stuffy nose? It's very important even to use little suction devices that you can buy on Amazon just to help clear the child's nasal airway so that the child continues nasal breathing. The environment, the air that the child is breathing in the house should be, you know, should be airy. It shouldn't be full of dust mites or cats. I wouldn't have cats in the house, to be honest with you. You know, a cat as a pet, they can release a lot of animal dander, and not all children are going to be able to cope with that animal dander. So yeah, I don't want to say there's a whole load of things to do, but certainly it would be amazing if parents were aware of the implications and just things to look out for. And if they were able to bring their child to a healthcare practitioner who understands and can identify tongue tie, mouth breathing, the palate itself, the craniofacial development, because that is huge. And unfortunately, not all healthcare professionals, even those who are working in the pediatric space, are trained to identify this.
Right. I think that's rare that we're looking at that, but we are trying to raise thriving babies. So what about the family that's listening that has a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and their mouth breathing, shallow, all the things you talked about? I know you're a proponent of mouth taping. tell us what else we can do. I mean, I know you wrote several books, and we'll pick those books up, but any quick tips for the older child? You mentioned an app. How do we reteach this?
So a few years ago, I decided I wanted to put all of the exercise free on the internet. So we have a little app which is quite simple, easy to navigate. It's called Buteyko Clinic. You download the app, you click in the section for children, and you have the complete video program for kids. The first video is understanding why should the child breathe through the nose, and I'm talking to my own daughter.
Oh, so great.
It's, in other words, it's kind of just giving the reasons of nasal breathing for that child and teenager. And my daughter at the time, when I was doing the exercise with her, is 9 years of age.
Okay.
And then I show her an exercise to decongest the nose, holding the breath. And then I show her a breathing exercise just to help slow down her breathing because of the connection between, say, if there's little worries going on, mental noise going on in the child's mind. And then I would always ask the child, when you think this way, how do you feel? If you're having a lot of mental noise, does it make you feel happy, or does it make you feel sad, or does it make you feel a little bit not as good as you should be feeling? And typically the kids, they get it, they're going to say, well, I don't feel great, but I think this way. And I say, okay, now you've identified it. You're paying attention to what you're thinking about, which is important. It's important that we just check and we stand back and we just say, okay, what am I thinking about at this moment? Am I thinking like the same thoughts over and over and over and over?
Right.
And all it's doing is making me feel down. And then I
believe everything that your brain tells you.
Well, you could even go further and say, don't believe every stupid thing that comes into your head.
Right.
And then I'd decide to the kids, well, how about we create a little bit of a holiday there for the mind? And I'll direct the children then to bring their attention onto their breath. And of course, the mind wanders, but that's the whole purpose. Then we bring the attention back. And every time we bring the child's attention back onto the breath, we're helping to develop their capacity to hold attention. And that's really, really important.
Yeah.
So you're developing a tension strengthening muscle almost. And then it's not just enough just to hold attention on the breath. I also want then the child, I would like them to breathe in a way that they tell the brain that they are safe. And that's all the brain wants. Whereas if the child is mouth breathing and breathing a little bit chest breathing and breathing faster.
It's a danger signal, right?
It's a danger signal.
Okay, so they cannot come out of fight or flight.
Correct.
When they're mouth breathing.
Correct. And switching to nasal breathing, and it's not about forcing nasal breathing. We do the nose and blocking exercise. Then we have the child sitting for 3 minutes with their lips together and seeing how well they can cope with nasal breathing. Then we have them walking for 3 to 5 minutes with their mouth closed. How do they cope during physical exercise with their mouth closed? And then we have them jog. So we do want to assess. So we have our own assessments with children, which I've included in the books anyway for parents. So any parent can literally sit down with their child and go through our program, because we put it out there for $25 or whatever, I don't know, the cost of the book is. So then coming back, I'm talking to the child and saying, okay, we really kind of need to tell our brain that we're safe here, because I don't want to be breathing fast and hard. I use myself as an example, because if I'm breathing fast and hard, I'm telling my brain that there's a threat, that it's not safe. And of course, the brain then will put us into this fight or flight response, survival mode. And survival mode isn't nice. We can't stay in it long term because it would just exhaust us.
Right.
So a very simple way then is just by using my hands, and I say to the child, just follow the breath while I tune in the child's breathing. And you're taking a very soft breath in through your nose, and then just a very, very relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out, and not taking bigger breaths. So it's not about bigger breathing. It's just about that soft, gentle breath in through your nose and the relaxed and slow and gentle breath out. So we don't breathe this way when we are stressed. We breathe this way when we are stressed. And the speed of the exhalation is fast. And if we breathe out fast, we tell the brain there's a threat. So we want to tell the brain that everything is okay. So we use the breath to convey that. And we know there is a part of the brain that's literally spying on our breathing. It's located in the place called the pre-Botzinger complex. There's a group of neurons there that literally spies on your breath all the time, continuously. And because your brain needs to be able to monitor if the if the body is under threat. So it uses the breath as a barometer for that.
Sure.
But we can use that to our advantage. And even with the kids. So you've got a little bit of stress going on. Okay, there's a little bit of mental noise going on. Let's tell the brain that we are safe. Take a soft breath in through your nose and just a very, very relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. And the breath out should be slow and relaxed. We don't time it. Slow it down relative to how you breathe. But when you take the breath in, don't take this full breath in. It's not necessary. Just soft. Nobody even knows you're doing a breathing practice. I speak for a living. If I could talk to 1,200 people. I don't want to go out on stage with my heart rate elevated because then I'm in a fight or flight response. So before I go out, I bring my attention onto my breathing. Anytime I notice my heart rate is a little elevated, I start slowing down my breath to stimulate the vagus nerve, to bring down the speed of the heart rate. I get out of my head, bring my attention into the body, and I walk out on stage and I talk from every cell of my body. So I access flow. And that can be done. Every child can learn the tools to do this.
That's great.
You know, I will make a statement as well. Education teaches us how to think. It teaches us how to reason and question and break information into tiny pieces. But education doesn't teach us how to think. Sorry. Education, it doesn't teach us how to concentrate. It doesn't teach us how to hold attention. And also, while education teaches us how to think, it doesn't teach us how to stop thinking. And a lot of our time, the thought activity that's going on in the mind, it's not practical. It's not serving a purpose. You know, while you're doing maths, that's thinking, but it's productive. You're doing English, it's productive. You're doing geography or history or whatever subject you're doing, you're thinking and you're developing your mind into a sharp analytical tool. It's productive. But what about when you're not doing an activity, that you're not task-oriented? Are you stuck in your head? And it's estimated that on average, we as human beings, we're stuck in our head 50% of the time. So 50% of the time we are literally living in our heads.
We're wasting it.
Well, we are, because we're not connecting with life if we're living in our head. Like, I had a beautiful breakfast there earlier on. The chef produces this. It was really, really aesthetically looking. It was lovely. I could smell it. You know, when I took the first mouthful, I was tasting it and tasting the texture of feeling it. And in order for me to appreciate that meal, I was merging all of my senses with that meal. And that's a different experience than an individual, whereas I did spend 25 years stuck in my head. And as a 20-year-old, when I really lived in my head, and I was highly stressed at the time, and of course, it wasn't a situation. That's why I can talk about these things, because I've been there, and I was this kid who was persistently mouth breathing, and no healthcare professional ever said to me, Patrick, breathe through the nose. So I do have a kind of a personal, not a gripe, but a motivation to try and, you know, based on my own experience.
That's super important.
But like, if I was previously in my past life that as a mouth breather, and the meal is put in front of me, I might just take a glimpse of it. But then that's it. I'm stuck in my head. I'm eating it, but I'm stuck in my head. I'm not even paying attention to what I'm eating. I'm not paying attention to the smells, to the sights, to the texture. I'm not even enjoying the meal. Does that make sense? You know, and that's only one example. So, like, I think our education, for a child and a teenager and a young adult, to be able to grow up with a capacity to hold attention to what they're doing is so, so important. But in order to achieve that, we need to have adequate sleep quality, not just quantity. You can have 10 hours of sleep. It doesn't mean that you're rested when you wake up. Quality sleep, functional breathing patterns, in and out through the nose, and also practicing observing what is going on in the mind and checking in. Am I thinking worrying thoughts, or the mental noise that's going on, and the story that goes around? And of course, the story that's not even, how do I know it's true? You know, it's just one side of it. All of that, I think, is essential for a child to reach their full potential.
Well, thank you so much. That's amazing.
Sure.
That was really good tips. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And everybody, you can pick up the book. We have Anxiety Free. I just keep thinking about our moms. The Breathing Cure. Which book did you write first?
I wrote a book in 2002 called Close Your Mouth. I have 11 books.
Oh, 11. Wow. Okay. And the breathing cure for better sleep, everybody.
That's the newest one. But my most famous book is called The Oxygen Advantage.
The Oxygen Advantage. I've seen that one.
That's
Okay.
for sports.
Patrick McKeown, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Christine. Thank you.